Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started this morning by welcoming all of you guys. Welcome. Nice to see all of you guys here at Watung Yu. Welcome to everyone online as well. This is the first day of a 5-day course where I'm going to be teaching you guys the foundation in the teachings of the Buddha, the path to enlightenment, helping you guys to understand this journey to enlightenment with all the foundational teachings. The way I'm going to get started is with some meditation, just to give you guys a chance to practice some meditation. And then afterwards, I'm going to introduce you to the course. We're then going to talk about the life story of Gotama Buddha. We're going to take a break, and then I'm going to teach you what is enlightenment so that you'll understand what enlightenment is. And then after our lunch this afternoon, I'm going to teach you some Buddhist chanting. So welcome to all of you guys. Whether you're joining here, you're joining online, welcome to everyone. And if you'd like to join for meditation, the way that I start with meditation is I start with some chanting. And again, I'm going to teach it to you this afternoon. But just so you know, these chants actually help to ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation itself. There isn't anything mystical or magical about these chants or anything like that. It's just to help ease the mind into meditation. But we'll talk about it more this afternoon. And then after the chanting, I'll come in with some guidance to help guide you in the meditation. Then there'll be a period of time where it'll just be quiet and we'll be meditating together, and we'll come out of the meditation with some more chanting. So if you'd like to join, you might take the seated position. This is kind of a common way to start, is in the seated position. There is lying and standing and walking, which I'm going to teach you all these positions in this course. But just to give you a little bit of guidance on the seated position, you can sit however you're comfortable. There's not just one way that's actually the right way to actually sit. But oftentimes people sit on the floor, or in a chair, on a bench, or on a sofa, something like this. If you're on the floor, you usually have a cushion under your rear, and then you just lightly cross your legs rather than having them really, really tight. Some people like to put their legs off the mat. This gets the hips up in the air, and it lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles. The Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and he put this into his lap. If this is comfortable for you, you could use this, but it's not about everyone doing it exactly the same way. Some people like to put their palms on their thighs or on their knees, or their palms up, or some people rest their hands comfortably in their lap. It's really up to you, whatever's comfortable. The upper body should be erect. This keeps the mind attentive and alert during the meditation, whereas if you were slouched, the mind would have a tendency to be dull or lethargic. But if you were real rigid, the mind could be overactive or uptight. So you'd like the upper body to be erect with the sternum up and the shoulders back. This will keep the mind attentive and alert during the meditation, but it also helps you to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose so you can get a nice consistent breath. So again, I'm going to ease us into meditation with the chanting, and then I'll be back with some guidance. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavanhang Apivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vichacharanang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusanang Poto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath, not forced or controlled. Just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Once the breath is well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. right. Once again, welcome to all of you guys. Nice to see all of you guys here. Welcome since we started meditating. What I'm going to do here to get us started is share something with you guys that I share with every single new student who starts learning with me. And it's this little talk where I help you to understand that this journey to enlightenment is about cultivating wisdom. It has nothing to do with beliefs, that you're not believing a bunch of things and hoping that something good happens when you die. The way that the teachings of the Buddha work is that you're learning his teachings, you're examining them, you're investigating them, then you're reflecting on them in order to independently verify them, and then you're practicing them in order to integrate the teachings into your life and actually train your mind. And this is where you see the results of enlightenment. And we're going to talk about what enlightenment is this morning as part of our course. But for now, just understand that enlightenment is where the mind is peaceful, it's calm, serene, and content with joy. You no longer experience any discontent feelings. All the anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy, even the slightest displeasure is eliminated from the enlightened mind. And the way that you get to that is through training the mind. You need to be able to cultivate wisdom. You can't believe your way to enlightenment. So there's no rites or rituals or ceremonies or worship in the teachings of the Buddha. When we talk about awakening to enlightenment, and we're talking about training the mind to awaken to this mental state of enlightenment, what we're talking about is cultivating wisdom. Because when you awaken to the natural laws of existence and you have wisdom about these natural laws, you're going to naturally make wiser decisions in the world that lead to more wholesome outcomes. Wholesome outcomes or wholesome Gotama, something that we're going to be talking about when we get to that part of the course. When we make unwise decisions, we're going to experience unwholesome results or unwholesome Gotama. And because of the lack of wisdom in the unenlightened state about these natural laws, you will go around and inadvertently make unwise decisions that are leading to unwholesome results in one's life. But when you awaken to the wisdom of a natural law, you're going to naturally make wiser decisions and you're going to experience wholesome results. We essentially have done the same thing about awakening to the wisdom of a natural law at other times in our life. When we were first growing up, none of us understood the natural law of gravity. We didn't understand it. We struggled. We had difficulties. We fell down. We hit our head. We busted open our knees or our elbows and we broke our toys and we cried and we cried and we cried because we struggled and had difficulties with this natural law. And this natural law of gravity will affect you whether you're aware of it or not. It doesn't matter whether you have wisdom of it. It's going to affect you. So as we grew up, we started learning and we started making wiser decisions because we started to awake to the wisdom of the natural law of gravity. So we started tying our shoes a bit tighter. We started looking at the surface of the sidewalk as we were walking. We stopped being so giddy and bouncing around all the time and jumping around because we kept falling down as little kids. We learned that those things were unwise. So we started making different decisions and therefore we started experiencing different results in the world. And now we're at a point where we can ride bicycles, we can ride motorbikes, we can climb ladders, we can get on airplanes and fly all across the world because we fully awoke to the natural law of gravity. And this happened somewhere around 8, 10, 12 years old that we fully awoke to this natural law. And we started making wiser decisions naturally based on this natural law. We started putting things that were very special to us in a certain place where they wouldn't get broken. We just started making all kinds of different decisions than we did when we were little kids with the lack of wisdom of this natural law. Well, the same thing needs to occur with all these other natural laws, the natural laws that the Buddha taught, namely the natural law of Gotama, or some people refer to it as karma. The word karma is from the Sanskrit language, where the word Gotama is from the Pali language. And people who study the original words of the Buddha, the original teachings are in the Pali language, so we tend to use the word Gotama. Now, this word Gotama, if it translated to just one English word, I would just use that word because it'd be easier for everyone. It isn't anything mystical or magical. What it is it's cause and effect, or action and result. It's the results of your decisions. There's no being who's overseeing this. It's not punishments and rewards. It's not about who's to blame or who's at fault. It's about a sequence of events that when we make certain decisions, it's going to produce certain results. So what we're doing on this path to enlightenment is you're awakening to the natural laws of existence, and namely the natural law of Gotama. So when we all are growing up, as I mentioned, we didn't understand the natural law of gravity, but it affected us whether we were aware of it or not. And the same thing is true about the natural law of karma. It's affecting you whether you're aware of it or not. And when you lack wisdom of it, you're going to inadvertently make unwise decisions that lead to unwholesome results. But then if you awaken to the wisdom of this natural law, you can make wiser decisions that produce more wholesome outcomes for you. And one of those wise decisions is, of course, training your own mind. Because as long as your mind has what you're going to learn about these pollutions in the mind, it's going to be hindered from making wise and wiser decisions. So this path to enlightenment, it's your journey to enlightenment. Essentially what a teacher is we are like a tour guide, guiding you through what it is that you need to learn and what you need to do in order to understand these natural laws. But it's you that's doing the work. So when you're listening with eager ears to the teachings, and you're not just believing them, but you're learning them, you're reflecting on them to independently verify them, and you're practicing them, then slowly but surely you can see the truth and you can get to wisdom, and now you can awaken to this enlightened mental state, slowly but surely. It's gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. One of the biggest myths about the life story of the Buddha is that he sat under a tree, he meditated, and he instantly got to enlightenment. This isn't actually true. It was gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. And you know this to be true because everything you've ever done in life has been that way. Whether it's learning how to read and write, whatever languages you understand, whether it's some job or occupation that you do, anything in life, it's been gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. And getting to enlightenment is the same way. So as you are in this class and for the rest of your journey in this world and the rest of your journey with these teachings, it's important that you maintain the responsibility for your own education, that you don't believe anything that people are sharing with you, including me. Don't believe anything that I say. Don't believe anything I write in books. Don't believe anything that we talk about here in these classes. Instead, you learn what I share with you. You can investigate it. You can examine it. Then you can reflect on it to independently verify it. And then you can practice it, integrating it into your life. And this is where you'll see the real results in your life. And I'm going to teach you how to do this tomorrow. When we dive into the very first teaching of the Buddha, I'm going to show you how to learn, reflect, and practice so that now you're not believing any of the teachings and you can gradually awake to this wisdom. Today, what I'm going to do with you is I'm going to help you to understand this course. I'm going to introduce you to the course. Then we're going to be talking about the life story of Gotama Buddha, because if you're going to take this journey to enlightenment, you'd probably like to know a little bit about this person. Then we're going to talk about enlightenment itself. Then this afternoon, I'm going to teach you Buddhist chanting. So this is kind of the plan for today. And what I'm going to do here is just use some visual aids to be able to help you understand in the introduction to the course and some of the other course content that I'm going to be sharing. We're going to be using these visual aids at different times. So first, this is the title of the course. And it's essentially 30 hours. It's from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. each day, Monday through Friday. On Friday, you'll see that we have a field trip plan, and we go a little bit past 3 o'clock, but nonetheless, it's basically a 30-hour course. This is my contact information that you're welcome to use and you're welcome to get if you'd like to contact me. Not that you need to necessarily contact me during the course. If you're not coming to a day of the class, it's okay. You don't have to contact me and let me know. You can just choose to either come or not come. It's totally up to you. It's your life. It's your decisions. It's just impermanence if you decide not to come. This contact information is more for after the class, because as you're journeying on this path to enlightenment, you're going to need help. You're going to need guidance from a teacher. You're not going to be able to get to enlightenment by yourself. So this is contact information for you to be able to contact me. And this contact information is on our website, so you could really just get it from our website from there. In terms of the structure of the course and the schedule and the plan, as I mentioned today, I'm just going to welcome you and kind of introduce you to the course. This is kind of the general structure of the course, that each morning we're going to do chanting and meditation at 9 a.m. And then after our meditation, by the way, this morning I just did a very brief meditation, just maybe 10 or 15 minutes of meditation. But each day we're going to be expanding that a little bit more. We're going to be making it longer and longer and longer so that you can gradually get used to meditating for longer and longer periods. But since this is a foundational course, I'm kind of building you up, starting kind of with a very brief meditation, and gradually I'm going to expand it over the course of the 5 days. So we're going to be doing chanting and meditation each morning, and Then around 9:30, we're going to do a talk on the teachings. I think of these as discussions rather than lectures or sermons or anything like that. That's not what this is. This is me having an opportunity to share teachings with you, you having an opportunity to learn those teachings, and then we have a discussion and you can ask questions and understand what the teachings are. And some people refer to this as a Dhamma talk. The word Dhamma means teachings. So this is a talk about the teachings, because you need more than just meditation to get to enlightenment. You wouldn't be able to just meditate your way to enlightenment. You're going to need other teachings besides that. Then around 12 o'clock each day, sometimes a little bit earlier, sometimes a little bit later, we're going to be taking a lunch. And this is an opportunity for you to go out, have lunch, spend time with your classmates, find some food. If you'd like to come back here, take a nap, relax, read a book, do whatever you'd like to do. I'm going to leave the whole center open. You can come and go as you please during lunch. But then eventually around 1:30, about an hour and a half lunch break each day, I'm going to start with another talk. And then that discussion is usually around something related to meditation. And that'll be the afternoons, where we'll actually be doing meditation together and learning about meditation as well, and actually doing another session, so that each day you're going to be meditating twice a day, as well as learning the teachings that you need. So over the next 5 days, you can kind of get used to meditating twice a day and see the impact that that has for you. And then we're going to generally finish around 3 o'clock. Again, sometimes a little bit earlier, sometimes a little bit later, but this is generally what our structure is. Each time we go to lunch, I'll let you know how long our lunch is and kind of what time I'm going to restart and things like that. And then all of this builds up over 4 days of learning, that on the 5th day, I invite you to this field trip where we go to some of the local Buddhist temples. We go to a Thai forest temple outside the city, and then we go to a city or a temple that's on top of the mountain. Some people refer to these as city temples, even though they're not all in the city. These are two different branches of Buddhism in Thailand, and by visiting the two temples on the same day, you can kind of see the differences and the similarities, and it can help you. What I'm going to be doing is sharing with you the artwork, the architecture, and the symbolism of the temples, because the teachings of the Buddha are embedded into the artwork, architecture of the temples. And if you understand the teachings, which you will understand a little bit more than you do now over the next 4 days, then when you go to the actual temples, I can teach you and help you understand and kind of glean information from the temples. It's kind of like the walls of the temple will speak to you when you understand a bit of the teachings, rather than just going around to the temples and like, oh, wow, that's beautiful, or oh, that's interesting. You'll actually understand why they've done things the way that they have in these temples. So if you'd like to come to that, you're more than welcome. It's going to start at 9 a.m. here on Friday. We'll talk more about it when we get close to it. And if you meet friends or other people throughout the week that would like to come to this, they're more than welcome. They can actually join this course at any time. You'll see some people will come this afternoon or tomorrow or Wednesday. You'll see people will be coming and going in and out of the course all throughout the week. And the same thing with this tour, that people are welcome to come to this tour, even if they haven't attended any of the classes whatsoever. So we'll talk more about that when we get to it. This course is based on this book. This book is titled Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. It's the first book of the book series, and you can actually get this book for free by downloading it from our website. So if you'd like to do that, you can. You can take it to a printer. There's plenty of printers. You can get it printed at your own cost if you like. If you'd like a printed version, I have them here. You can just reimburse us for our printing costs, and they also have them on Amazon too. If your country has access to Amazon, you can get access to not only this book, but the entire book series through Amazon. I'm going to be teaching you based on these chapters, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 19. These are the chapters that we're going to be teaching in this course. Now, there are other programs that I go chapter by chapter by chapter through the entire book, and this is something that I'm going to actually be restarting on October 20th. We're coming to the end of this. It's called the Group Learning Program. I've taught it like 7 or 8 times now, where over a 7-month period, I go through every single chapter of the book. So this particular course is a really good start to understanding the teachings of the Buddha, but this is a program that sometimes students move into. After a course like this, they will move into the group learning program so that you can thoroughly learn every single chapter of the entire book. And like I said, this is available through PDF, through Kindle, through print, and it's the first volume of the book series, and you might decide to actually read this along with the actual course, or maybe after the course if you would like to read it after the course, because there's some things that are in the book that aren't in the course. And there's some things that are in the course that aren't in the book. So the combination of these two things will actually help you to be able to glean all the information that you need in order to be able to continually grow and develop on the path. Okay, these are the topics that I'm going to be teaching you as part of the course. The first one that we're going to be discussing this morning is the life story of the Buddha, because like I mentioned, if you're going to embark on this journey to enlightenment, you'd probably like to know a little bit about this person's life story to understand a little bit about them. So I'm going to teach you about that. Then I'm going to teach you after our mid-morning break, enlightenment. What is enlightenment? This is going to help you to understand what enlightenment is. Because if you're going to take this journey somewhere, you kind of like to know, what is that place? Like if I came to you and said, hey, would you like to go to Chiang Rai? This is a city up north. And the first thing you're going to say is like, well, what's at Chiang Rai? If you've never been there, right? You're going to say, well, what is this place? What's there? What's it like when I get there? So that way, if you know a bit about Chiang Rai, you can more easily navigate your way to it. And then once you arrive to Chiang Rai, you will know, hey, you're in Chiang Rai. So the same thing is true about enlightenment, that if you know a bit about it, you'll be more able to easily navigate your way to it. And then once you arrive, you'll know that you've actually arrived to enlightenment. So that's why I'm going to teach you about that. Then tomorrow I'm going to teach you the Four Noble Truths, establishing right view. This is 4 simple statements that's going to teach you the problem in your mind, the cause of that problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. This is the very first teaching of the Buddha. This is what's going to help you to have a breakthrough of finally understanding what's causing your anger and your sadness and frustration and all these other discontent feelings. Because how could you ever eliminate these discontent feelings if you didn't understand what was causing it? So I'm going to teach you this in a way that you can independently verify what's actually causing your anger and all these other discontent feelings. If you right now believe that other people are causing you to be angry, you're going to find out tomorrow that this isn't actually true, that it's not other people, it's not the outside situations that are causing your mind to be frustrated or agitated. It's something within your own mind. And by understanding this really empowers you to fix it and train your mind so that you can eradicate your discontent feelings. Then I'm going to teach you the Eightfold Path. This is 8 individual steps that is going to guide you to enlightenment. This is the path to enlightenment for all humans. If you're interested in getting to enlightenment through the teachings of the Buddha, you would need to know this teaching inside and out, backwards and forwards, left, right, up, down. So I'm going to start teaching it to you using the original words of the Buddha. And you'll be able to learn it, you'll be able to reflect on it, you'll be able to practice it. And this is the core central teaching of the Buddha that everything else plugs into. So that's going to be tomorrow morning. Then Wednesday, I'm going to be teaching you what's called transforming the 3 poisons, craving, anger, and ignorance. The Four Noble Truths gives you like a little window into the unenlightened mind, helping you to understand what's going on in the mind. But then the 3 poisons is going to broaden your understanding of that, and it's going to deepen your understanding of what's going on in the unenlightened mind and how to actually fix it. I'm going to explain to you what these poisons are. I'm going to explain to you the symptoms of them so that you can see that your mind actually has these. And then I'm going to explain to you the solutions of how to fix it so that you can transform your mind away from these poisons or these pollutions so that you can experience more and more peace and joy in your life. Then I'm going to teach you what's called the 5 precepts, a householder's guide to daily practice. If you've learned that the Buddha taught no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and no intoxicants, the Buddha actually didn't teach this. This isn't what the Buddha actually taught. I'm going to use the original words of the Buddha and show you what he taught. Because no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, no intoxicants, this sounds like a bunch of rules. It sounds like commandments. It sounds like black and white. This isn't the way that the Buddha taught. He didn't teach this way. He used much more illuminating language than this. So I'm going to explain what these are, and then I'm going to relate it to day-to-day life so you can see how to apply these in your day-to-day life. And we're going to be using the original words of the Buddha so you can see what he taught and what he didn't teach on this important topic. Okay, these are 5 impactful decisions that you could make wisely and it will produce wholesome results for you. Or you could make them unwisely and it'll produce unwholesome results for you. Then on Thursday, I'm going to teach you what is karma and how does it affect me. This is a natural law that you need to awaken to. And while we're going to be talking about it specifically on Thursday morning, you could really say everything that I teach is going to be about the natural law of karma. But we're going to go in and specifically talk about it on Thursday about 4 different types of karma, because you're going to need to know these 4 different types of karma in order to be able to awaken to this natural law. Then I'm going to teach you what is merit, and continued support on the path to enlightenment, helping you understand this important topic of merit and how to receive continued support in your journey to enlightenment. I'm then going to teach you in the afternoons these meditations. You're going to be learning about breathing mindfulness meditation in the positions of seated, lying, standing, and walking, because you're going to need those at different times because your body can't permanently be in the same position. It's not possible. And then you're going to learn Buddhist chanting as well as part of this. And then I'll ultimately be teaching you how to integrate these teachings into your life, because the 5 days that we're going to spend together is going to be wonderful. It's going to be great. But if you're not integrating the teachings into your life, you're not going to actually get the real benefit. So you'd like to really capitalize on the 5 days that you're spending here by integrating the teachings into your life. And that's what's going to really produce the significant results for you. If we just spend a great 5 days together, okay, we spent a great 5 days together. But where you really get the benefit is by integrating the teachings into your life. So that's why I'm going to teach that to you at the end of the course. And then, of course, we have our field trip and all that good stuff. So do you guys have any questions on any of this? Yep. If you could use a microphone here, we have people online who's joining us. That way they'll be able to hear us.
Hey. First of all, thank you. And second of all, I've wanted to know about your past and your decision to move to Thailand, and specifically Thai Buddhist tradition. And your life story.
Sure, I could share a little bit of that with you. Would you be okay to talk about that after, or maybe at our first break? Because that way I can share that with you, and we don't need to take up class time, because your question's very valid and very important. But to really understand, you're probably going to need some more time to digest that. Is that okay with you? Okay, great. Thank you. So at our first break, just come on over and I'll chat with you and let you know, and anybody else who would like to learn it as well. And those of you guys online, if you'd like to understand too, at least the people in Zoom, I can leave the microphone on and we can talk about that as well. Okay. So yeah, I'll do that at break. All right. So let's talk about this first topic. This first topic, I title it in the book as The Difficult Human Existence, Sickness, Aging, and Death. This is where I share the life story of Gotama Buddha. And the reason why I titled this way is because these are the things that motivated the Buddha on his journey to enlightenment, is that he observed sickness, aging, and death. And this was interested to him, and he was interested in helping people escape this. So I will share with you the life story of the Buddha organized in this kind of way, that we're going to talk about his birth, we're going to talk about his early life, we're going to talk about his journey to enlightenment, and we're going to talk about his teaching career. And then ultimately we'll talk about sickness, aging, and death, and how this is a real struggle for the human being, that either your sickness, aging, and death, or the people around you, when they're experiencing sickness, aging, and death, you might have a lot of challenges with that. So we'll talk about this in relationship to the life story of the Buddha. So this individual that we refer to as the Buddha, he was born as Siddhartha Gotama. He was born into a royal family. His mom was a queen and his dad was a king. And when the mom was pregnant, during this time frame, the way that they would do it is that the mother would be taken back to her homeland in order to give birth. So since she was a queen, they organized a caravan and they were taking her back to her homeland so that she could give birth around her brothers and sisters, her mom, her dad. People could help her to take care of the child. And on her way back to her homeland, she goes into labor pains. So they need to stop the caravan. And when they stop the caravan, she gets out, she goes over to a tree, and she's holding on to this branch of the tree, trying to deliver the baby while standing up. And the baby's trying to come out of the normal birthing canal, and it can't come out of the normal birthing canal. So the baby ends up breaking through the side of the stomach, and it was born through the side of the stomach. And because of this, his mom ends up dying 7 days later. Now, today, if this occurred, we would just do a C-section and everything would be just fine. But they didn't have that medical technology 2,500 years ago. He was born in 563 BCE. So they didn't have that technology to save her life. And because a woman's birth or a woman's death was not uncommon when she's given childbirth, during this time they had protocols in place that if the mother would die during the birth or at any time thereafter, that the mother's siblings would adopt the children as being their own. So Siddhartha Gotama's mom had an older sister, And she ended up adopting Siddhartha Gautama as her own child. So essentially, his aunt became his stepmother, and now she raised him as her own child throughout her entire life. So Siddhartha Gautama was born into this royal family, and there's something that's said that was happening at his birth that I don't know that it was true, and I don't know that it was untrue, but it's documented in the Pali Canon, so I'll share it with you. That what people say occurred at his birth is that as soon as he was born, that he walked 7 steps, and lotus flowers were blossoming under his feet, and then he spoke, and he said, "This will be my last life." Now, I don't know that this is true, but I don't know that it was untrue because I wasn't actually there at the time. I suspect that it isn't true. And the reason why is because when somebody does something as wonderful as the Buddha did, sometimes over time, as the stories are being handed down, people kind of embellish the stories in order to make him look even better than he already was. We don't need to embellish the life story of the Buddha. His life story is already miraculous as it is, what he did during his life. And I don't suspect that he actually experienced this, and this is what was going on at his birth. Because if this was actually true, the next part of the story wouldn't actually be needed. The next part of the story, which is his father, the king, was interested to know what his son was going to become. This was a common practice during the lifetime of the Buddha, that your father, particularly a rich father like a king, would summon fortune tellers to come tell him, what is my son going to become? Well, if your son walks as soon as they're born and lotus flowers are blossoming under your feet, and then they're speaking at birth, you kind of know, like, this the child's pretty special, and you kind of know what they're going to become. So I don't think that part of the story is actually true, but it could be, who knows? But nonetheless, his father summon these advisors. There's 108 advisors that come and talk to the king. And 107 of them share with the king that his son is going to be this great monarch. He's going to be this great ruler. He's going to rule over your territory far and wide. He's going to expand your territory. And the father, hearing this from 107 advisors, is like, yeah, that's my boy. All right. That's what I want. I want my son to expand my territory so we can have a bigger and bigger kingdom. Well, there's this one advisor who came in at the very end, 108th advisor, and he comes in and he apologizes to the king. And he says, "Sir, I'm so sorry. I heard what the other advisors said, and they're 100% right. Your son is going to be a great leader, but he's not going to be the type of leader that you think. He's not going to be a monarch. He's not going to be a ruler. He's going to be a spiritual leader." And his father didn't like this. And just in case this spiritual advisor was accurate, his father decides he's going to sequester his son into the palace and not let him go outside and get involved in worldly affairs. His father thought that if he went outside and got involved in worldly affairs, he would end up being interested to be a spiritual leader. So instead, he kind of lavishes him with all kinds of gifts and all kinds of things that a rich father could give to their son. He gives him all kinds of entertainment, wonderful food, wonderful fabrics, beautiful women bathing him and taking care of him, everything and anything, treasures and riches, anything you can imagine that a father who is a king could give to their son. He gave this to his son. And what he was trying to do is get him hooked into the life of being a monarch, because he knows that he could never acquire this type of lifestyle in any other way than being a ruler and being a monarch. So for 29 years, Siddhartha Gautama is in the palace being lavished with all of these things. And now, at the age of 29, Siddhartha Gautama realizes he's about to become the king. Because during this time frame, you would become the king when you turned the age 30. And when you got to the age of 30, your father would retire, and then they would be right alongside of you to be able to teach you how to be a king. So at the age of 29, he realizes, hey, I'm about to become the king, and he's never even been outside the palace. He doesn't even know what the kingdom is like. So he decides to go outside the palace into the kingdom in order to be able to see what the kingdom is like. And his father doesn't know that this is what he was going to do. So he goes outside the palace and he takes with him his royal attendant. This is somebody who's like his chief of staff, his main confidant. And he goes outside the palace and he sees what's called the 4 observations. These are the things that motivated him to go on his journey to enlightenment. He sees a sickly person, an aging person, he sees a dead corpse, and he sees a roaming ascetic, someone who's given up worldly life in order to seek a better understanding of life. And when he sees this sickly person, he has to turn to his royal attendant and ask what's going on, because he sees all this disgruntledness around the person who is sick. He has to ask his royal attendant, like, what's going on over there? Why is that happening? And the royal attendant's like, oh, that person's sick. They're not going to be able to work. And now they're not going to be able to acquire food and the things that they need in order to sustain their life. Right? This was all new to Siddhartha Gotama. He had everything that he ever needed when he was in the royal palace. So to see people struggling on the street, being sick and not being able to provide for the things that they need in order to sustain their life, this was completely new to him. He didn't understand this. So that's why his royal attendant had to explain it to him. Then he sees this aging person, and the same thing. He sees this disgruntledness, right? This person is getting old and decrepit, not able to take care of themselves. And he has to ask his royal attendant, what's going on over there? And he's like, this person is getting old and they can't take care of themselves, and they're really disgruntled about that. And this has a real impact on Siddhartha Gotama. Then he sees a dead corpse, and the same thing. He sees all these people grieving and in sorrow and despair. And he needs to ask his royal attendant about what's going on over there. And he explains to him what's happening. And this has a real impact on Siddhartha Gotama. That the way he looks at it is he looks at the kingdom as being full of misery and despair. Because when he's in the palace, everything's wonderful. He's living this life of luxury. But when he comes out into the kingdom, he sees this misery and despair, this grief and sorrow, this displeasure. And this has a real impact on him. And then he sees the fourth thing, which is a roaming ascetic, someone who's given up worldly life in order to seek a better understanding of the world and understand this sickness, aging, and death and why it's occurring. And Siddhartha Gotama decides that that's what he would like to do, that he's not interested in ruling over this misery and grief and despair, that he would like to go on this journey to be able to understand the life that people are living and why they keep experiencing sickness, aging, and death, and why they're so disgruntled and sorrowful during these periods of times. So he decides he's going to leave the royal palace and go on this journey to try to figure this out. So when he goes back to the royal palace, at this time he has a wife and he has a young baby. He has an infant son. And he didn't understand his mind enough at that point, but he understood it to a certain degree that he felt like if he said goodbye and he kissed them and hugged them and all these kinds of things, that he wouldn't be able to leave. So he kind of looks in on them while they're sleeping, and he decides to leave in the middle of the night. And he takes with him his favorite horse, and he takes with him his royal attendant, and he leaves out of the palace. And when he leaves out of the palace, he eventually gets to a point where he lets his horse go, he lets his royal attendant go, he lets him know, like, okay, you've been this great royal attendant, you can go on with your life. And then he cuts off his hair. He has this long, beautiful, flowing hair. And the reason why is that during this time frame, if you were part of the royal family, you would grow your hair very long. And this is how people would know that you're part of the royal family. Because when you went out into the kingdom, people would see this long, beautiful, flowing hair, and they know you're a member of the royal family. Because the people who are working in the fields and doing labor work, we wouldn't be able to have long, beautiful, flowing hair because it would get tangled up, it would get knotted. We wouldn't have the time to detangle it, to shampoo it, to take care of it. So it was only the royal family that had servants and the time and the resources to be able to sit back and let people detangle their hair and comb it and brush it and all these kinds of things. So when he cut off his hair, it's kind of like, I'm never going back. Because nobody would ever think that he was the king when he didn't have this long, beautiful, flowing hair that he had grown for 29 years. So cutting off his hair was like, I'm never going back to the royal palace. It also helps us to accomplish other things, which you guys will learn about tomorrow, which is called realizing non-self. You don't have to cut off your hair in order to get to enlightenment, but this is one thing that some people do in order to train your mind to a certain degree. So that's why some people still cut off their hair today, but you'll understand this more tomorrow. But nonetheless, he goes on this journey to be able to figure out how to get to enlightenment. And there were various teachers in the world at that time that were claiming that it was their teachings, that they had figured out how to get to enlightenment. And if they would study with that person, that they would be able to get to enlightenment. So Siddhartha Gotama went and took up training with a teacher. And his thought was that he was going to be able to help him get to enlightenment. So this teacher is teaching him to hanging himself upside down from trees, to lay on beds of nails, to pierce the body with metal implements, to starve himself. The thought was that if you could cause physical pain to the body and your mind could overcome that pain, that you would get to enlightenment. So that's what they were doing, is they were causing all this physical pain to the body. And after 1 year of training, this teacher comes to Siddhartha Gotama and tells him that he's mastered his teachings. And now you can share my teachings because you've mastered what I have to teach you. And Siddhartha Gotama realized his mind wasn't any more peaceful than it was when he was in the palace. And he realizes that this teacher's teachings didn't lead to enlightenment. So he decides to leave, and he goes and studies with a different teacher. And now this teacher was claiming the same thing, that it was his teachings that would lead to enlightenment. And he was essentially teaching him a lot of the same things, hanging himself upside down from trees, laying on beds of nails, piercing his body with metal implements, starving himself, and all these kinds of things. Once again, after a year's time, this teacher comes to Siddhartha Gotama and says, "You've mastered my teachings. You can now share my teachings." And Siddhartha Gotama realized his mind wasn't any more peaceful than it was when he was in the palace. So he feels like he wasted 2 years of his life, and he decides that he's frustrated with the whole thing, and he goes off into the forest by himself. And when he goes off into the forest by himself, he's trying to figure out how to get to enlightenment. But the only things that he knew at that point was to cause physical pain to the body. So he continues to starve himself when he's in the forest. He takes this so far that he's only eating 1 grain of rice per day. This is what he's sustaining himself on, is 1 grain of rice per day. And he's getting to the point where he's actually about to die. All of the meat in his body had pretty much deteriorated. He was essentially skin and bones, and he was sitting on the edge of the forest, and he was meditating. And there's this mother and a young girl, her daughter, that comes by, and they see that he's basically on death's doorstep. He's about to die. And they beg and they plead with him to eat some rice. And they offer him some rice. And he reluctantly accepts this rice. And he starts to eat this rice. And he realizes in this moment something that we refer to as the middle way. And from this point, his practice really accelerates. What he realizes what the middle way is that when he was in the palace, he was living life with all these pleasures. He was living this life of luxury. And then when he left the palace, he basically swung all the way to the other side, where he was eating 1 grain of rice per day. And he was basically on 2 sides. He was in the 2 extremes. And he realizes that in order to get to enlightenment, you have to come to the middle. He eventually, during his teaching career, relates this to a musical instrument, that if a musical instrument has a string that's too tight and you pluck it, it doesn't play beautiful music. It doesn't play the way the instrument was intended to play. But the same thing is true if the string is too loose and you pluck that, the instrument doesn't play the way it was intended to play. It doesn't play beautiful music. It's only when you tune the string perfectly in the middle that it'll play beautiful music. And he realizes the mind is the same way, that if you hold on to things too tight, it doesn't function well. But if you're too loose with what's going on in your life, if you're indifferent and could care less, that doesn't work well either. So it's coming to the middle that he starts to now practice. And this is where he discovers and practices the Eightfold Path. And slowly but surely, he trains his mind over the next 4 years, and he actually gets to enlightenment. He attains enlightenment, and he knows that he's attained enlightenment because his mind is peaceful, it's joyful. He knows what it felt like to be angry and sad and frustrated and all these other discontent feelings, and now he doesn't experience that anymore. So he knows that he's attained enlightenment, but he realizes that his teachings are so radically different than what anybody else was teaching at the time. They were teaching themselves to hang upside down from trees and things like this, but yet all of his training had to do with the mind and training inside the mind. So he goes to this go and share his teachings. And the way that this happened is he started to go back towards the area where he was originally studying with those first 2 teachers, and he encounters 4 of his previous classmates and 1 of his previous teachers. And when he encounters these 5 people, they start laughing at him. They start joking him. They start mocking him because they think he actually had given up on the path to enlightenment, because they see he looks bright. He looks radiant. He's got this meat on his bones and he looks healthy. And they're thinking that in order to get to enlightenment, you've got to be starving yourself. You got to be disparaging the body. So they thought he had given up on the path to enlightenment, and they start laughing at him and joking him and mocking him. But by the time you get to enlightenment, that doesn't affect you. You're not going to be affected by that. It's not going to shake up your mind. You're not going to be angry or irritable or frustrated or embarrassed or anything like that. So he just calmly walks over to where they're at. He sits down on the ground. He takes his hand and he touches the earth. And when he touches the earth, he performs the one and only miracle that he ever performed. And this miracle was that all these animals came to where he was at. So when he touches the earth, the squirrels, the rabbits, the birds, the butterflies, the lizards, the everything just comes, right? These monkeys come, everything comes to where he's at. And these 5 people, seeing that miracle, they're like, okay, you've got our attention. And they sit down and they listen to what he has to say. And he shares what's called the 4 Noble Truths. And I'm going to share that with you tomorrow so you can understand what that is. In 4 simple statements, he explains the problem. He explains the cause of that problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward, how to completely solve it. And because his teachings are independently verifiable, these 5 people could understand those 4 statements, and they could see that, yes, he had figured it out, because they could independently verify that what he was teaching was the truth. So from that point forward, these first 5 students become the first kind of people who are learning with him, and now more and more and more people are learning with him over the course of his life. So he gets to enlightenment at the age of 35, and then he dies at the age of 80. So for 45 years, he dedicates his life to sharing his independently discovered teachings with countless people. He lives a life of homelessness, where he basically walks down the street, and if people would like to give him food, he accepts their food. And then if people would like to offer for him to stay inside their house, he would just stay inside their house, and he would teach them. So the exchange was that he was sharing teachings with them, and he was getting the ability to sustain his life. So he was able to sustain his life through food, clothing, shelter, and medical care that people were providing him. He never went back to the royal riches of the royal family. Instead, he lived this life of homelessness, roaming around and teaching people what it took to get to enlightenment. And countless people got to enlightenment during his lifetime. Just countless people were getting to enlightenment. And then ultimately they end up preserving his teachings after his death so that countless more people can get to enlightenment. These are essentially the 3 main criteria of what make a Buddha, is that they get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They then dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people. And countless people are going to get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. Then they preserve the teachings in such a way that countless more people get to enlightenment after their death. So these 3 criteria all came together, and Gotama Buddha is identified as an actual Buddha. Having a Buddha in the world is very rare. It doesn't occur very frequently, and the last one that the world is currently aware of is Gotama Buddha. So 2,500 years ago, he was an actual Buddha, and the people today aren't aware of any individual who meets those same 3 criteria. So a Buddha is very rare in the world, and they share their teachings so that countless people can get to enlightenment during their life and after their death. So what motivated the Buddha on this journey to enlightenment is the sickness, aging, and death. He was trying to figure out, why is there so much sorrow and grief and displeasure during this period of time? You're going to learn in the 4 Noble Truths in detail why this is, but I'll just give you a little heads up on it. What it is the mind is craving permanence. The mind is longing, yearning, and wanting things to be permanent. If you're craving permanent health, when you experience sickness, you'll be angry, you'll be disgruntled. And this body isn't permanent. You're going to experience sickness. It's not possible for you to be permanently healthy. Even when you're enlightened, you're still going to experience sickness. And you can't experience permanent youthfulness, because of impermanence, this body is going to change. You're going to experience aging. But if you're craving for permanent youthfulness and having a youthful body, when you're aging, you'll be disgruntled or agitated or annoyed. And then the same thing with death. If you're craving permanent life, as you're getting closer and closer to death, you'll really struggle with that. And not only will you struggle with this based on your own life, but the life of the people around you. If you want your mom and dad to be permanently healthy, when they're sick, you'll be frustrated or agitated or annoyed. Or if you want your parents to be permanently youthful, when they are aging, you'll really struggle with that. Or if you want your parents to permanently be in this world, when they die or they're getting close to death, you'll really struggle with that. Because the mind in the unenlightened state is craving permanence, but yet you live in an impermanent world. Everything around you is impermanent. So I'm going to walk you through this tomorrow so you can see it more clearly. But let me see if you guys have questions here on this topic of the life story of the Buddha. Is there anything you guys would like to ask about his life story? For those of you guys online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. And those of you guys here, if you guys could use the mics, that would be great. Let me see if we have any questions here. Okay. So I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So I'll just end this talk with this final thing that I usually share, that no one ever said life would be easy, but it's also not supposed to be tough. Learning Gotama Buddha's teachings is not easy, but learning and practicing the teachings of the Buddha will ensure that life is not tough, right? In the unenlightened state, life can feel very tough sometimes, right? The sorrow, the grief, the displeasure, the pain, this can feel very difficult for you. Life can sometimes feel very mundane in the unenlightened state. But nobody ever said life would be easy, but it's also not supposed to be tough. Right? Learning and practicing the teachings of the Buddha as you train your mind will ultimately get to this enlightened mental state where the mind's always peaceful, it's always joyful, and your life will be completely at ease. There'll be nothing that you're struggling with and having difficulties with by the time you get to enlightenment. There'll be certain challenges that you'll face, but you won't be struggling and having difficulties anymore. Right now, when you meet with a certain situation, you might really struggle. You might have difficulties. And that's just because your mind lacks wisdom. There's certain wisdom that you don't have, and that's why your mind's struggling and having difficulties there. So what I teach people to do, and what the Buddha teaches people to do, is rather than run away from those struggles and difficulties, is to walk towards it. Because if you run away from your struggles and difficulties, you're just ensuring that that's going to happen over and over and over and over and over again, because you haven't cultivated the wisdom that you need to overcome it. So if you run away from your struggles and difficulties, you're just ensuring it's going to keep repeating over and over and over again. But when you're experiencing struggles and difficulties in life, if you walk towards it, then you have an opportunity to cultivate wisdom. And now when you cultivate wisdom, the next time you're in that situation, you'll know exactly how to solve it, because you've cultivated the wisdom. So the words that the Buddha give you on this topic is, he says, do not shrink back from the struggle. Do not shrink back from the struggle. Instead, what I teach you is to turn around and walk towards the struggle. And that's where you actually will cultivate wisdom. Walking towards the struggle is learning the teachings of the Buddha, reaching out to your teacher and asking for help, cultivating wisdom. That's what's going to actually walk towards the struggle. And when you cultivate wisdom, you can actually overcome that struggle and ensure that it's never going to happen again, because you're making different decisions. But if you lack wisdom, you'll keep making the same unwise decisions that is leading to that same unfortunate situation. But when you cultivate wisdom, you'll make different decisions and it'll produce different results for you. So that's why you would like to walk towards the struggle, walk towards the difficulties, cultivate wisdom so you can make different decisions and it'll experience different results. But if you lack wisdom, you'll just keep making the same unwise decisions that keep leading to the same unfortunate situation. So life is not supposed to be tough. It can actually be quite easy and quite straightforward, but you need the wisdom of the natural laws. Because when you live in a world that you don't understand, you will struggle. You will have difficulties. That's essentially what the unenlightened mind is experiencing. It's living in a world that it doesn't understand. There's these natural laws that are affecting you, and you don't understand them. And that's why the mind struggles and has difficulties. It lacks wisdom. Just like the mind struggled with the natural law of gravity. We were living in a world that we didn't understand. That's why we struggled and we cried. But once we understood it and we understood the natural law of gravity, we're like, no big deal. We understand this thing. Yeah, we can make different decisions now. We can peacefully coexist in the world. This natural law of gravity doesn't hurt us and affect us because we fully awake to it and we understand it. And now we can make wise decisions related to it, right? But as long as we don't understand these natural laws, life can feel very tough and very difficult. But it doesn't have to. We can actually cultivate wisdom about these natural laws, and now we won't struggle and have difficulties any longer. Okay? So this is everything that I have to share on this particular topic. What I'm going to do here is take a little break. It's now 10:15. Let's take a good 20-minute break. Come back at, what would that be? That would be 10:35. Let's just call it 10:40, right? Let's call it 10:40. And when we come back at 10:40, what I'm going to do is I'm going to teach you guys what is enlightenment so that you guys can understand what this is. So this will give you guys plenty of time to spend with each other, build some relationships. If you need to go get some snacks or refreshments or use the bathroom, just take your time and we'll get back together at 10:40. Okay? So thank you guys for your questions and thank you for your understanding, and I'll see you guys after the break. Okay?